Coming up on Theater Talk.
The question, though, I have for you, Dick, is you are, shall we say, older Dick Cavett now, but you have to play younger Dick Cavett.
Where do you see that?
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. Now, you know, Susan, as literary feuds go, it did not get much nastier than that between Lillian Hellman and Mary McCarthy back in 1979, when Mary McCarthy on Dick Cavett's TV show famously said of Lillian that every word she writes, including and the, is a lie. And it sparked lawsuits, and I think the women were still at each other's throats when they both died.
When they died.
That feud is now the subject of a new play called Hellman versus McCarthy. It stars Marcia as Mary McCarthy. Welcome to Theater Talk. Roberta Maxwell as Lillian Hellman. Oh. And playing Dick Cavett is Dick Cavett.
I get the worst parts.
Welcome to Theater Talk.
As you said before the show, that's a little strange. And it is, because suddenly you're confronted with, well, wait a minute, what am I playing myself?
Yeah, that's right.
What's the difference between that and being myself?
But the question, though, I have for you, Dick, is you are, shall we say, older Dick Cavett now, but you have to play younger Dick Cavett.
Where do you see that?
You have to play younger Dick Cavett in the play, do you not?
I do, in fact, yes. It's a work of imagination.
On the audience's part.
Part of the audience. You know, I actually thought getting one of those quick change no masks the Japanese who slipped on. Or you know, so we're looking like the late Pinky Lee in one scene. But no, I think the audience will just have to take the fact that only a genius could do it as well as I will. I mean, could do what you were saying. Get me out of this.
Roberta, when he walks on stage, the years just melt away.
Absolutely. Yes, we gaze into each other's eyes. And it's
oh yeah, I can see gazing into Lillian Hellman's eyes. That must be love at first sight.
I've gazed into those eyes, and you know the word basilisk?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Susan doesn't know the word.
Look it up. It says Hellman.
Yeah. All right. So take us back, Dick, to the spark of this literary feud. You had Mary McCarthy on the show.
Yeah.
But she wasn't on the show to bash you, Lillian Hellman, right? She came on to, what was she? I mean, I'll just talk about a new book.
Well, in fact, she had a new novel out called Cannibals and Missionaries. And she was on because she had a book out, and also because she had been an excellent guest before. They don't get much smarter than Mary McCarthy.
unless you're Lillian Hellman.
Well,
I beg to differ.
Lillian.
Oh, I can see it starts.
Which Roberta is, yes.
And the thing came up, here's what happened.
You brought it up.
Well, it's never really been told. This is an exclusive for you. In the trial, I don't know if they found the guest notes that I had that day. They may have. In which the lady, Ann Terry, my staff, who had handled Mary, said she would like to give some attention to a young writer that she feels is underpraised. So on the air, I said a couple of times overpraised, underpraised, sort of trying to cue her into that, and she sort of missed it. She didn't pick up the cue, and we never discussed the young writer, the underpraised young writer.
Yes.
But she did pick up on overpraised, and I unfortunately did too, and said, could you name some overpraised writers? And she mentioned two very good ones, two very overpraised writers, John Steinbeck and Pearl Buck, who someone told me once when she won the Pulitzer, or surely not the Nobel Prize, and it was announced at a class at Columbia, a writing class, the laughter went on for 5 minutes. That Pearl Buck won this award. But anyway, so that was really it. It was that magic word, overpraised, and I kind of pushed her a little on it, trying to get her to pick up her cue about the young writer. Instead, she said she could only think of one more, a thoroughly dishonest writer, Lillian Hellman, who is so every word she
Tremendously
writes is
overrated.
a lie, and, well, including Anne.
Is that the word you used? Tremendously overrated?
Tremendously.
Tremendously overrated.
Right, right.
Miss Hellman, whose sense of humor left off where she began, decided that this was in a tragic decision,
She was watching.
disgraceful
Yes.
decision.
He was watching, yeah.
And because of her incredible dishonesty and lying, decided to. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you were sitting. I get you your fourth
Water.
drink.
Listen, you're beginning to convince me, and I'm playing the cat.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, she was a lovely woman.
In every way. And
Yeah, great massager.
So Lillian strikes back. Now let me ask the two of you playing these parts. Marcia, I assume you've sort of plunged into the research here. What was the trigger for that? Why did she dislike Lillian Hellman so much? Why did she take this opportunity to blast away?
Well, she considered herself to be an intellectual and quite educated and quite prepared to make judgments. And she, as far as she thinks, she really does think that Lillian Hellman writes dreck. She honestly believes that.
Melodramatic plays.
Thought that for many times. Now, according to her, it has nothing to do that she tried to seduce one of my ex-lovers or any of that. That's
Right.
totally based on
Or
her
that she
writing.
remained a
Yes.
committed Stalinist.
And that, very importantly, that she remained a committed Stalinist through, through all the evidence that she shouldn't have been. They were
Was a
both
tr-
anti-fascist.
Yeah, Mary was a Trotskyist.
Yes,
They don't get
Mary
along
was a
with Stalinists.
Trotskyist, not nearly as.
But they still were really plugged into this.
There were
idea
many
that-
things
we were
that they had
very
in
left
common.
wing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
But
both.
She was a Trotskyist and hung around with the partisan
She was
view
a
people.
Stalinist
And I
or
was
a Marxist,
confirmed
she called
Marxist.
herself, yes.
Yeah.
And,
I never denounced.
And she could never denounce
But
them.
hold on.
Never did.
So we're going to switch to Lillian. We'll give you your due, Lillian. We're still
I
on
could
Mary
kill her.
later.
Making them crazy, aren't we?
So really, it was literary criticism. She thought that Lillian Hellman was not as good as she was.
And
billed.
and because she was so, quote, overpraised and over-touted, that she was trying to do her best to say these are all lies. And in fact, she wasn't the only one that called many of her memoirs made up. But she was probably the most vocal.
Now let me ask you, Roberta, Lillian, you're sitting at home watching this attack.
Yes, yes.
Why did this one wound so much? I mean, surely you'd been, critics had their go at you over the years. You've been praised, but also put down. Why, from this particular woman, did it set you off to try to ruin her life by suing her?
It had been a very long-standing argument between us and animosity. And Lillian, had been really put on the hot seat because of Julia, which is part of this book that she wrote called Penta, the movie that was made from the story.
Right.
And which is her story. Lillian was a memoirist, and she was a fabulist, and she created, she was imaginative in how she created her life.
So they made this much celebrated movie.
They made the movie
Julia.
Julia, which it turned, where unfortunately Julia, the book, I use the pronoun I, and it's not about I, it was actually about another woman. They say it's never been, the woman has never really
Been found?
Yeah, her name was Muriel Gardner, the actual person who went to, who played the part that I think that I take over.
And went and helped someone escape at the Nazis.
Yes, and it really wasn't me, it was somebody else, okay.
So she's got a point.
Oh no! Oh, she definitely.
She's
has.
a liar.
And everybody says. I mean, I was on the hot seat, but frankly, darling, she was just jealous of me. I was richer than she was. I was more famous than she was, and politics aside, we were very competitive with men. I had had an affair with this toad of a husband she had been married to, Edmund Wilson.
I agree with her on that.
She had no trouble attracting toads.
Was your affair before or after she was married to him?
Well, I had the affair before. I was but I was a woman who liked to hold on to all my lovers. She was a woman who had to marry all her lovers.
So into this
Not all of them.
cauldron of hatred, bungles old Jolly Dick Cavett.
Young Jolly Dick Cavett.
A young guy.
Did you have any sense of the animosity between these two women before?
I knew enough about them and had read their stuff and so on that I knew that they were politically at odds, to put it mildly. And I didn't know as much about what a liar Hellman was and I was so sorry when the book Julia got shot down because I thought it was great fun to read. Then Ernest Hemingway's former wife, one of them, Martha Gellhorn,
Yep.
card-carrying Hellman loather, did brilliant research work and just about knocked down every single thing in the book that she would. And if Lillian had only somehow, and this has to be put down to self-destruction, said, okay, it's a fiction. I thought it might be more fun for people to think it happened or something.
Yeah.
But no, she continued to deny it. And
She called you after the show, right?
she did. I didn't. Nobody expected anything. And in fact, when I had come off stage in the show, looking back now, you might think everybody's saying, Jesus, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
She said, nobody thought anything wrong with anything that was said on the show. It was criticism of a writer by a writer.
Yeah.
There was then a First Amendment, and there was freedom of speech, although Miss Hellman wasn't fond of it, though she passed herself off all her life
Oh, yes.
as the high priest of freedom of expression and so on. And her famous quote, "I can't cut my conscience to fit today's fashions," which my friend, the late Jean Stafford, said was not even her line. It was Hammett's, and she
Appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but I don't want to besmirch her reputation. But when Julia was said to be fraudulent from top to bottom, and then I remember once I was in the French Quarter in New Orleans, first time just fell in love with the French Quarter, and I happened to be there when a little French Quarter paper came out with something like 34 photographic evidence errors of things Lillian Hellman claimed were true. There was no church called this, and there was no this and that.
There was
Now,
no Holocaust.
If she had just made them short, if she had just said, "I wrote these for entertainment, they're fiction," that'd be something else. She was a very sick and ugly woman.
But didn't you invite her to come on the show and say, listen,
Oh,
come
she
on
was
and,
on the show. She was a good guest.
But not after.
But no, after,
you mean,
come
yeah.
on and have your say, respond to the...
Yeah, well, but I was going to say afterward, nobody saw anything wrong with the show. And when I came off stage, I just remembered this last week, a guy said, "Nice show," and I said, "Thank you." And then I said, "Who was that guy?" And they said, "The network lawyer."
He didn't even pick up on it.
Nobody saw any writers, critics, they say things all the time. Anyway, so there you have it. But
So she called
it's
when?
so funny that if I had said something else at one point in the show, we would all be not here.
So when she called, then how did you respond? What did she say?
Did you go...
Why the hell didn't you defend me? That's a little nicer than she said. And,
So then you invited her on and she said?
well, to that I said, Lillian, I never thought of you as anybody who needed defending, for God's sake. She pretty well did that herself and had the need to. But I did think maybe they would come on and debate. That would have been wonderful.
Yes, absolutely.
But neither responded to that. And by that time, this unforgivable lawsuit was way down the road, and years were going by, and Mary McCarthy's money was
Right, yes.
fading out, and Lillian was getting sicker, but she never,
But she had a lot of money.
Yes.
she had plenty of dough.
Were these ladies ever friends and it was a friendship that went awry, or from the beginning were they?
And it's funny because, you know, they had really many things in common. They were both progressive. They were both liberals. It wasn't
Right.
like one was a, you know, Tea Partier and the other was a right.
I doubt that they met more than twice, would you say?
Well, maybe it's socially at other sides of the room, that kind of thing. But I don't think. I think one would have left if the
But
other.
You were never friends.
We were never friends because politically, to be a Trotskyite
Yeah.
is really to be, like, you know, very low on the ladder of liberalism and socialism.
I've never quite understood this though. Why did you, Lillian, persist in defending or not renouncing Stalin after all the evidence of millions of people killed? Why did she never say
Renounce
we were wrong?
Stalinism.
Why?
Well, she was just that kind of girl.
Yeah.
She
Stubborn.
would
Just
not
very
let
stubborn.
go of her belief. And a lot of people, you know, held on, even in the face of the terrible atrocities. They believed in the
Ideal.
ideal. And in fact, one of the lines in the play, I say, at least the Soviets were trying to find an equitable society. And I think from the way she felt about her own life, she was always involved with different causes, but she just couldn't step back. She was a woman who couldn't say, I'm wrong.
Did you ever push her when you interviewed her? Did you ever push her on this issue of why she never
No,
renounced
how I
Stalin?
would love to have. And I have
Terrified of her?
well, I have not looked at the shows I did with her. I think I will in the next few days because I'm beginning to feel the lack of it. But I do remember reading at the time afterwards what a chance I missed because Alfred Kazin, perhaps,
yeah.
or someone of that circle, wrote a piece bitterly denouncing her and saying even after the Moscow trials and the writers were being murdered, she continued to be a friend to Stalinism.
It seems to me, though, Dick, like an obvious question to ask her on the show, and you just never.
I wasn't very good in those. I'm sure you know the feeling. We're friends. Would you believe?
Absolutely. And here I am asking the tough question. I mean, is it just would it have been awkward? Would it have been uncomfortable?
I'd have been happy to do it. I just somehow didn't have it in my mind. I wouldn't even be surprised if I did ask it and she had some answer and time went on.
Yeah.
But I don't think I did, and I wish I had. And I know my late friend, the great Pulitzer Prize-winning, quietly one of the best writers in America, and former wife of Robert Lowell, Jean Stafford, would have loved it because whenever I referred to Lillian in her company, she said, not Lillian, old scaly bird. Jean had an inspirational name for people.
Roberta, you were going to.
I was going to say, more than a Stalinist, she was a Marxist. And she just felt that that was the system that was appropriate to spread around the world. Of course, one knows now. But at that time, it was a viable philosophy. And isn't it interesting that in spite of what Mr. Cavett and Jean Stafford thought of her, that we're talking about her.
Oh, yeah.
She's hot,
Yeah,
she's
sure.
still a hot subject, and she's still, you can look at the books, and if you don't know the history, you can pick up those books.
Oh, they're
and
wonderful.
Really enjoy. She was one hell of a good writer.
She was, a good storyteller. I liked reading the stuff too. I was sorry to learn how much of it was made out of whole cloth, but
Well, so is Hans Christian Andersen, darling.
Well, but
Yeah, but he didn't parade around us saying that this is my life story.
I've never heard of her.
should we mention our wonderful director? Yes.
Oh, yes.
I was just
Maybe
thinking,
we should mention the playwright.
Yes.
too.
and-
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
The
director is?
The director is Jan Buttram, who's she also runs the Abingdon Players.
Right.
And she's just, we all love her.
Great.
Wonderful.
And we have the only playwright I know whose last name is Maury. But it's not like in Maury Friedman.
Or Tuesdays with.
Yeah.
What's
He's not a borscht comic.
What's his first name?
Brian.
Brian.
Brian Maury.
Brian Richard Maury.
Brian Richard Maury.
Yeah.
Did
and
he
now
write
here
this
are
for
the
you?
names
yes.
of all of the actors
Oh,
in
isn't
the
he
play.
good?
There are only 300 of them.
It's a fairly small.
I know as a host how you feel.
And it's on white paper.
You know,
right.
you love it as a host when they bring out notes because that always works really well.
We
on
have
television.
a wonderful
The
cast,
crackling
I will
of the
say.
paper covers the
That
dialogue.
covers all that.
Oh, and they got to change the glasses too. That's
it's gonna- yes.
riveting television when
This
this
is
happens.
textbook talk show. But I really feel that we really ought to mention the wonderful Roberta Maxwell, Peter Brower, Rowan Michael Meyer, Marcia Rudd or Rod, I can't read my handwriting.
Rod, you fool.
Marcia. Don't fool with names. Jeff Woodman, and not necessarily in that order. Now,
But it is alphabetical.
here's
there.
the technical crew.
Okay,
Julia Roberts, I want to thank. Don't play that music.
before we go, we got to wrap it up. But I
We're not
wonder-
worth two shows, I guess.
I know, but I wonder what.
Oh, you're always
you,
worth,
wait a minute.
you're worth a month of shows.
But I want to, Dick. You were privy to a lot of these great literary feuds. You know, one thinks, of course, of Norman Mailer and
Yeah, Gore.
and Gore, and John Simon was always getting into fights with everybody.
Yeah, these egregious idiots. I love John.
Best play I've ever seen in my life. What happened to
I
the
love John
art?
Simon.
What happened to the art of the literary feud? We don't seem to have these literary feuds anymore.
Gee, that is a lack in our society.
But we don't have overpraised writers anymore, is what McCarthy said.
It's got to have something to do with Dick Cheney.
I mean, is it because the writers are not stars anymore? How often do you see writers on late night talk shows as you had before?
It's funny that you mentioned my notorious Mailer Vidal show. Somebody at the network said, Cavett's got 3 authors on the same show. and it's the damnedest show I ever did. It was the most thrilling show to watch. It was just like a great play.
Well, they're not letting that happen again.
But do you remember, you used to see sniping in the New York Review of Books, and writers beating up on other writers' works. But that whole, the art of the literary feud is gone. People don't even fight with critics. People don't even dump plates of pasta on critics' heads as, what's her name did to John Simon?
Right.
Yeah.
Sylvia Miles.
Sylvia Miles.
Sylvia Miles.
Oh, yes.
To her
Fame.
But we have no sense of why that is. Maybe the writer's not paramount.
McCarthy says, well, one of the things he says in the thing is that we don't have those kind of overrated writers like we used to have.
Yes.
She goes into this whole thing about now there's people who write books of great sex and violence, and then we have those that are either witty or serious, but that have literary merit. And so we don't have, it's a wonderful phrase. She said, we don't, if I can remember my own line, we don't have the, what is the word?
Go ahead, finish it.
Oh, no, I can't finish it. You finish.
Oh, well, no. I noticed, have you ever noticed this? You'll have an actor on your show who's been in a play for 3 months to 2 years, and he'll go, I have a wonderful speech in the second act. I say to Martha over there, I say to her,
Yes.
my God, I did it last night. Over and over, they cannot, off the stage, out of character, think of a line in their play to save their lives.
Going back to what you said, though, when did you see the last authors panel on Jimmy Fallon? I mean, they won't let that happen anymore.
Well, author was a dirty word in those days, and in fact, there was a much circulated joke that when Cavett gets a talk show, the difference will be from the other shows, he'll bring the authors on first. Because they were always just before midnight or 1 in the morning. But but then I want to say, well, listen, I had on Buddy Hackett and every comedian in the business and every
rock stars and everything.
rock stars and politicians. And you were thinking of Janis Joplin, perhaps, or well, we won't go back on that. But it was a dirty word at the network. Fascinating point. Is there time?
Yes.
Sure.
With this case, I forgot this. Tell me if I told you. She says in her defense, Mary, in the key statement, she says, as I said in an interview once, she's such a dishonest writer and does and ends and so on. So when the legal stuff came up, I said, but she said it before. And a distinguished attorney said, that doesn't matter. I said, why? Because it was in print. People don't read, but they do watch television.
Yes, that was
That is a legal.
why I felt that I really had to go ahead with it. It didn't matter what she'd said, or Alfred Kaysen. Once it was said on television, it was worldwide.
It was said in the Paris Review.
Exposure.
Nobody's reading, but
And she actually says it in a way that she knows that it was hyperbole. You know, that when we sort of laugh about it.
She knew she'd gotten off a good line.
Yeah, and so she was just repeating herself, and like I knew myself that it was a little over the top. But
You know, I never said this before, but it occurred to me that what the old bag should have done was, when she was libeled or slandered as she saw it, to have gone to one of her friends. I remember dinner at her apartment once I was at, and Mike Nichols was there, and a lot of really good people. Not that Mike Nichols
A bunch of
is
Stalinists?
there was
Don't sue me, Mike.
my hero, Mike Nichols. Here was Chris Lamenhaupt, the Times book critic, and a couple of other people.
Noted Stalinist.
And when this happened, she should have said, Mike, write me a couple of really witty lines.
Zingers.
And I will retort
Yes.
with these 2 lines. And
bury
she
her.
would have been popular for that. And Mary would have lived longer, quite literally, I think. And a lot of sloppy water that went under the bridge would not have.
I guarantee when you come to see this play, you are going to love Lillian Hellman.
That is what makes for good plays.
Spoken like a great
This
actress,
was hazardous
Roberta.
casting because to put a woman this charming in the
I know,
role
but
of
I
a
see the steel.
toad.
I see the steel coming out there. All right, the play is Hellman versus McCarthy at the June Havoc Theater at the Abington Theater Company, is it called? Yeah. Marcia Rod is playing Mary McCarthy. Roberta Maxwell, Lillian Hellman, and Dick Cavett is playing the network.
Thing I've aspired to all my life.
Oh, you're alive. All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the CORY and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy STRELSIN Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency, and the Theater Development Fund's Technical Accessibility Program, which helps provide closed captioning.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.